From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the news at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Ayotunde Balogun. Hello and welcome tonight. Flags fly half-mast as nation enters 7 days of mourning. The federal government declares a week-long national mourning as preparations conclude for the burial of former President Muhammadu Buhari in Daura tomorrow. A gathering of tributes in London. Vice President Kashim Shettima visits the former late President Muhammadu Buhari's family, joined by ex-President Goodluck Jonathan and Ghana's former leader Nana Akufo-Addo as global leaders honor Buhari's legacy. General Abdulsalam Abubakar recounts shared final days with the late former President Muhammadu Buhari, while the former head of state extends his condolences, revealing he and former President Buhari were both hospitalized in London before former President Buhari's passing. And the Awujale of Ijebuland, Obasikira Detono, is laid to rest in Ijebu-Ode amid an outpouring of royal homage and tradition.
And on business, National Bureau of Statistics says informal sector set to be captured in rebased GDP.
On sports news tonight, the Super Falcons forward the ongoing Women's African Cup of Nations. Rinsola Babajide joins Italian club AS Roma Ladies on a 2-year deal.
And from the nation's capital, Katsina Governor Daura leads condolence visits to former President Buhari's Daura hometown as Kaduna neighbors pay tribute.
Good evening and indeed welcome to the news at 10 at this solemn hour in our nation's history. Nigeria mourns the passing of one of its former leaders, President Muhammadu Buhari, whose death in London has drawn a wave of reflection, condolence and tribute across the country and beyond. Tonight we bring you the very latest on the high-level diplomatic and family engagements unfolding in the UK as Vice President Kashim Shettima and Chief of Staff to President Bola Tinubu, that's Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, led a delegation to London on the President's directive. We also hear from fellow statesmen, past and present, those lives whose lives intersected with the late leader's decades of public service, including former heads of state and regional leaders. And as the nation prepares to receive the body of the former president, we reflect on his legacy, his influence in the military and democratic Nigeria, and what his passing means at this moment in our national journey. Well, thank you for joining us as the news begins right now. Well, as the nation mourns the passing of the immediate past president of Nigeria, the federal government has constituted a high-powered committee to coordinate a state burial for the late former President Muhammadu Buhari, while also announcing the rescheduling of the Federal Executive Council meeting from Tuesday, July the 15th to Friday, July the 18th. Now, the disclosure was made in Abuja by the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mr. Mohammed Idris. According to Mr. Idris, President Bola Tinubu directed the move to enable members of the Federal Executive Council to participate fully in the burial rites slated to hold in Daura, Katsina State. Well, a 7-day national mourning period has been declared, with flags to fly at half-mast across the country, while Tuesday has been declared a public holiday in honor of the late statesman. Nigerians are urged to join in prayers and reflections for the repose of the former president's soul.
The President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has directed that 25 members of the Federal Executive Council have been directed to proceed to Katsina immediately to participate in the full schedule of the burial arrangement and the 3rd-day prayer of former President Muhammadu Buhari in Daura. The 3rd-day prayer will come up on Wednesday, 16th of July, 2025, in his hometown in Daura. You are aware that there was an earlier announcement that the Federal Executive Council meeting will hold on Tuesday, tomorrow, 15 July 2025. This has now been rescheduled for Friday, 18th July 2025, after the third day prayer. And this is to, of course, to give room to members of the Federal Executive Council and other government officials who will travel to Katsina to participate in that burial arrangement. The President has declared tomorrow, Tuesday, as public holiday. So while you have 7 days of national mourning, tomorrow, Tuesday, is work-free day across Nigeria.
Let's go to our crew stationed in the UK for updates on preparations for the repatriation of the remains of late President Muhammadu Buhari. Our London Bureau Chief, Juliana Olayinka, reports.
Well, good evening from Abuja House here in London, the location of the official residence of Nigeria's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. It's been a busy and emotional day for Nigeria's leadership delegation. Now, since the early hours, senior government figures have gathered here in the British capital following yesterday's passing of President Buhari. The Vice President, Chief of Staff Femi Gbajabiamila, the Borno State Governor, Foreign Minister Ambassador Yusuf Tuga are among many here in London tonight to condole with the Buhari family. They're also here, of course, to oversee arrangements for the repatriation of the former president's body and represent the federal government at this moment of national mourning. Now, earlier this evening, those condolence visits continued. Former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan and former Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo both visited Abuja House to pay their respects. They were joined by senior diplomatic figures from across the Commonwealth. Now, here in London, preparations for the late president's dignified return home are now finalised. As confirmed by the federal government, his body will depart London at 6 a.m. tomorrow, arriving to Katsina State for burial in his hometown of Daura. A state funeral is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon in accordance with Islamic rites and full national honours. Well, from Abuja House tonight, there is a clear sense of sadness, but also unity as Nigeria prepares to bid farewell to a leader whose legacy, though complex, remains a defining chapter in the country's history. Juliana Olayinka reporting for Channels Television News in London.
Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima and the Chief of Staff to the President, Femi Gbajabiamila, have paid a heartfelt visit to the family of the late former President Muhammadu Buhari in London. Acting on President Bola Tinubu's directive, the two top officials were also there to oversee preparations to accompany the former leader's body back home to Nigeria. While with the family, they offered deep condolences and delivered President Bola Tinubu's personal message of sympathy and solidarity. The delegation also stopped by to see Malam Maman Daura, nephew of the late president, who is currently recovering in a London hospital. In a gesture of statesmanship, Vice President Shettima also met with former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan and Ghana's former President Nana Akufo-Addo, who both came to pay their respects. Our correspondent, Emperor Simon, has the report.
The death of former President Muhammadu Buhari, announced by his family on Sunday afternoon, came to many Nigerians as a rude shock. Vice President Kashim Shettima and the Chief of Staff to the President, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, acting on the directive of President Bola Tinubu, arrived in London a day after to accompany the remains of the former president to Nigeria for burial in his hometown Daura in Katsina State. As clearance for the repatriation of the body is finalized, condolences have continued to pour in for the family from different quarters. Vice President Kashim Shettima, accompanied by his spouse, led the federal government delegation to condole the immediate family to the deceased in London, expressing deep sympathy. The federal government delegation also visited Mr. Mamman Daura, nephew to late President Muhammadu Buhari, who is also recuperating in a London hospital.
Baba, at the instance of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to come and fiercely identify with the family in this period of grief, it's not a loss to the family alone, but to the entire nation. And the president was personally grieved, was personally touched. He said he's one of us. That was the exact word he used. May Allah grant the soul of our patriarch, of our father, eternal rest, and reward him with his Al-Jannah Firdaus. And may Allah also give the family, the government and people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria the fortitude to bear the irreparable loss. It was an institution. He has sought the lives of each and every one of us here. Words cannot adequately capture the depth of our grief. But inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. Once again, on behalf of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, please accept our heartfelt condolences.
Excellency, I'm grateful to all of you for coming to commiserate with us on the death of Muhammad Buhari.
The delegation also met with former head of state, General Abdusalami Abubakar, who was discharged from the same hospital where the former President Muhammadu Buhari drew his last breath. Former Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo and former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan also registered their condolences to the family in London. They are received by Vice President Shettima and the Chief of Staff to President Tinubu, Mr. Gbajabiamila, after visiting the immediate family to share in their moment of sadness. The burial of former President Muhammadu Buhari is expected to take place on Tuesday, July 15, when his remains arrive Nigeria from London. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
In a moment of personal reflection, former head of state General Abdusalam Abubakar, who coincidentally was receiving treatment at the same London hospital where former President Muhammadu Buhari passed, has expressed deep sorrow over the loss. He described the late president as a true patriot, a disciplined military man, and a national figure who left a mark in both the uniform and in office. General Abdusalam Abubakar said former President Muhammadu Buhari's passing will be deeply felt by his fellow military colleagues and political allies alike.
Fortunately, we were in the same hospital together, but I have been discharged. So when I heard the news of his passing away, I quickly went there to condole with the family and see what can be done in order to get him ready, to get the corpse ready to be taken home.
Talk to me about the man, your relationship with him, when you met him, your fond memories of him.
Well, my relationship with General Buhari went back to as far back as 1962. We joined the military. He was my senior. And during the unfortunate civil war, we were fighting in the same sector with him. General Buhari is a gentleman who is very quiet, but exceptionally honest. You can trust Buhari with anything on this earth, and he will not betray you. During his tenure as a military officer, you have seen how he has tried to fight corruption, and also he established war against indiscipline in order to make us Nigerians behave the way the civilized world behaves. He introduced the war against indiscipline, and Nigeria was cleaner and more respectful during that tenure. Unfortunately, we lost those values that he tried to inculcate in Nigerians. When he became the democratic president, again, he tried his best to make sure that he fights corruption. Unfortunately, most of the officers, some of the officers who served with him are found wanting. They didn't do as much as is expected of them. So may he rest in peace. Well, certainly his death has been a big blow to Nigeria. President Tinubu has asked the vice president to come so that he can escort the body. This shows you the magnitude that has befallen Nigeria. With the passing away of President Buhari, politics in Nigeria will certainly change. I hope for the better.
In part two, after the break, the Awujale of Ijebu land Obasikiru Adetono laid to rest in Ijebu. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, broadcasting live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Flags fly at half-mast as nation enters 7 days of mourning. The federal government declares a week-long national mourning as preparations conclude for the burial of former President Muhammadu Buhari in Daura tomorrow. A gathering of tributes in London. Vice President Kashim Shettima visited former President Muhammadu Buhari's family, joined by ex-President Goodluck Jonathan and Ghana's former leader Nana Akufo-Addo as global leaders honor Buhari's legacy. General Abdulsalami Abubakar recounts shared final days with former President Buhari. The former head of state extends condolences, revealing he and former President Buhari were both hospitalized in London before President Buhari's passing. And the Awujale of Ijebu land Obasikiru Adetono is laid to rest in Ijebu amid an outpouring of royal homage and tradition. For Governor of Borno State, Professor Babagana Zulum, President Muhammadu Buhari's death is a great loss to the people of Borno State and the country as a whole. And looking back at the Buhari administration, Governor Zulum explained that former President Buhari was a leader who stabilized the state during the height of the Boko Haram attacks. He believes that the late president lived well, as he prays for the family for the fortitude to bear the loss.
On behalf of the government and people of Borno State, I want to commiserate with the federal government of Nigeria, the president of Nigeria, the government and people of Katsina State, and indeed his family, over his demise, and may Almighty Allah, in his infinite wisdom, forgive and grant him eternal rest. The contributions of President Muhammadu Buhari to the growth and development of Borno State need not to be overemphasized, because we have started witnessing gradual return of peace when he took over as the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in 2015. Borno State was largely controlled by Boko Haram before 2015, but immediately as he took over the mantle of leadership of the country, he decided to transfer the military headquarters to Borno State, thereby bringing lasting peace and stability to the state. In addition to this, Borno State has been facing serious challenges of power outage as a result of vandalization by Boko Haram. It's under its leadership that Borno State, that the federal government has established an independent power supply, the gas power supply, through the NNPC. And you know what it means to the people of Borno State, especially to Maiduguri.
Former Minister of Labour under former President Muhammadu Buhari, Senator Chris Ngige, is speaking up against certain perceptions against the late president. Senator Ngige says President Buhari tried his best to fix the economy, but Nigerians are a complex people. This can be attested to by past presidents. On the removal of fuel subsidies, Senator Ngige says the agreement with Labour was that the nation's refineries and the Dangote refinery were to come on board before fuel subsidy was to be removed. We were speaking to our political correspondent, Terry Ikumi.
When I hear so many of the things said about the state of economy under Buhari and what he should have done or what he should have not done, I laugh. I laugh for two reasons. Number one is that Nigerian economy. It's not an economy, you will use theory. The theory of an econometrician from Harvard or MIT and come and apply it here. No. This economy is a very complex economy. The people of Nigeria are complex people. He will even tell you, anybody who has been president of Nigeria will tell you, from Obasanjo to everybody, will tell you that Nigerians are complex people to manage. And we are.
How do you respond to people who say that President Buhari did not have the courage to remove fuel subsidy, even though it was necessary at the time?
We did a lot of discussions on that with a lot of people, experts, and even the labor unions. So they insisted that they're not against fuel subsidy removal, but that before the removal, the 2-3 refineries in Nigeria and Dangote refinery should come on. It's a position government accepted. And that's what we're working on too. And it's in our hand over nose and everything.
So let's now head to the nation's capital, where Millicent Walker is standing by to give us the very latest from our Abuja studios. Hello, Millicent.
Hi, Ayotunde. Many thanks. And less than 24 hours after the demise of the late former President Muhammadu Buhari, mourners have started arriving his residence in Daura, Katsina State. Governor Daura of Katsina leads a list of personalities that are paying condolence visits to his hometown, including former President of the Senate, Senator Ahmed Lawan. Meanwhile, some of his neighbors in Kaduna are also paying tribute to the former president.
The ancient city of Daura, the hometown of late former President Muhammadu Buhari, is in a somber mood of mourning. The sorrowful mood envelopes the residence of the former president as mourners gather at his residence to condole with family and friends of the deceased. One of the former president's closest friends, Mr. Suleiman Amani, and his driver, Mr. Yao Chiroman Baka, believe that the late president's simplicity made him remain deeply connected to his community, as they urge Nigerians to emulate his good deeds and forgive his offenses.
Muhammadu Buhari is a principled person. He once told me that he never siphoned public funds, so people should learn how to be just and trustworthy. It is now that Nigerians will realize that they missed a good father and leader, especially Northerners. May his gentle soul continue to rest in peace.
Wallahi mutum ne mai riko amana mai rike Najeriya tana bukatar irin wa'annan mutanen.
Nigeria needs people with Buhari's character. If any of his cabinet members share some of his qualities, Nigerians will have no reason to travel abroad for greener pastures. His loss is painful, and I urge Nigerians to please find a place in their heart to forgive his misdeeds in his military career as petroleum minister and as president for 8 years.
Governor Diko Rada of Katsina State is among the early callers as he leads a delegation that includes state officials and former president of the Senate, Senator Ahmed Lawan.
His ascension or his election into the office of the president in 2015, the first instance, was as a result of his track record of public service, of duty, of integrity in public service.
Meanwhile, there is heavy security presence in Daura town, including the entrance of the Daura Emirate Council. However, commercial activities continue uninterruptedly along the major road linking the residence of the former president. The mood on Sultan Road in the government-reserved area of the Kaduna metropolis is calm as residents come to terms with the death of the former president Muhammadu Buhari, who is one of the prominent residents of the area. However, there is no presence of sympathizers at the Kaduna home of former President Buhari. Only security guards are in duty. They informed Channels Television that relatives of the former president had traveled to Daura, his hometown in Katsina State. However, some neighbors and associates of the late leader describe him as an incorruptible and kind individual.
In terms of security, he actually provided for the security personnel. He provided for so many things. But for these capital projects, this road, actually, I will live for long to remember him. We really fine with him. He's very good, very kind person, very honest person. He's very kind with us, very well. That's all, food, money, everything we needed.
The late former president had moved from Daura, his hometown, to Kaduna on February 27, 2025, almost 2 years after leaving office. It was from his Kaduna residence that he traveled to London for medical treatment, where he passed on at the age of 82.
And we invite you to stay with Channels Television, your home for the news, as tomorrow from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m, our special live coverage of the state burial of former President Muhammadu Buhari will begin. Join us as we bring you exclusive real-time footage of this historic event, honoring the life, leadership and legacy of a man who journeyed from military ruler to democratically elected president. Throughout the broadcast, we'll be joined by a panel of distinguished guests, historians and political analysts offering rich insights and also reflections on the enduring impact of General Muhammadu Buhari, the soldier, the statesman and the symbol of national unity. It promises to be a moment of national reflection, and we urge you to tune in and be a part of history as Nigeria bids farewell to one of its most consequential leaders. In part two, after the break, National Bureau of Statistics informal sector says that the sector is set to be captured in the rebased gross domestic product. That's on Business News. Please join us again. You're watching Channels Television, coming to you live from our Abuja studios. The remains of the late Awujale and paramount ruler of Ijebuland has been committed to Mother Earth at his private home in government-reserved area, Ijebu-Ode. The event witnessed the presence of the former Vice President, Governor of the state, Dapo Abiodun, federal government delegation led by the business mogul Aliko Dangote, Governor of Lagos State, members of the National Assembly, former governors. Well, according to dignitaries and residents, his reign will be remembered for his clamor for traditional rulers in the state to be buried according to their religious beliefs. Also, the creation of Ijebu State from the current Ogun State, with capital in Ijebu-Ode. unity of sons and daughters through the annual Awujale festival, among others. The late Awujale was the longest-serving traditional ruler in the country. He died at the age of 92 after holding the traditional institution of his domain for 65 years.
The remains of the late Awujale and paramount ruler of Ijebu land has been cremated to Mother Earth at his private home in government-reserved area, Ijebu-Ode. Former Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Governor of Ogun State Dapo Abiodun, his Lagos State counterpart Babajide Sanwo-Olu, Federal Government delegation, business mogul Aliko Dangote, some members of the National Assembly, and some former governors were all present at the event to pay their last respect to the paramount ruler of Ijebu land. Some of the dignitaries and residents at the event described his reign as one of the most impactful because of his clamor for traditional rulers in the state to be buried according to their religious beliefs, the creation of Ijebu State, as well as the promotion of unity of sons and daughters of Ijebu land through the annual Awujale festival, among others.
The Awujale was a truly remarkable person, a man who has made royalty an envy of all who don't have it. Essentially, he was a man of integrity, a man who spoke his mind, and a man who had so much wisdom. He had not just love for Ijebu land, he had love for the country. And particularly when the country was in a turmoil, he took the right side and spoke his mind. Apart from that, he's a man who has carried out a lot of development in Ijebu land.
Without any doubt, the situation in Ijebu land cannot be the same again, because the people have been used to a paternal support, a great godfather who have navigated the land successfully a bit over the years. And I think this community have no choice but to begin to come together to see how they can continue where Kabisi have left off. We just thank God for his life. Pray that God will grant repose for his soul.
In his tribute, Governor Dapo Abiodun described the former Awujale as an embodiment of service to his people and one who restructured the traditional institution, adding that Nigeria will miss the wise counsel of the longest-serving traditional ruler.
Today, we salute this legend, this giant of history, this enduring symbol of Ijebu land. Though he has joined the ranks of our ancestors, his legacy will continue to inspire and define us. On behalf of my family, the entire government and the good people of Ogun State, I express my deepest condolences to our president, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR, who is a dear son of Kabiyesi. The Oloris, his children, grandchildren, the Ijebu National Council, the Council of Otumbas, the High Chiefs of Ijebu land, all our League of Imams. I also condole with the whole nation on the passing of our dear leader and former president, Muhammad Buhari GCFR, another legend who was one of Baba's close allies and confidants.
Oba Sikiru Adetono was installed as king on April 2nd, 1960, which made him one of the longest reigning traditional ruler in Nigeria. Born on May 10, 1934 in Ijebu-Ode, he died on July 13, 2025, at the age of 91.
Well, let's switch now to some politics. The leadership of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, in the Federal Capital Territory says neither the coalition movement nor the recent defections to the African Democratic Congress, ADC, will threaten the fortunes of the party and the forthcoming area council elections. The FCT-PDP leadership expressed this confidence at the official presentation of the INEC nomination forms to chairmanship and councillorship candidates of the party for the February 2026 area councils election. The FCT territory has a total of 6 area councils with 62 political wards.
6 area council chairmanship and 62 councillorship candidates of the People's Democratic Party receiving the INEC nomination forms from officials of the party for the February 2026 area councils election. The chairman of the party in the FCT appeals to the candidates to align their ambitions with those of the party.
Your personal ambition can make us to lose that election. But if you don't have a personal ambition, your ambition is that of ambition of the party. Let us look at the person that at least is popular enough to gain vote for us. Please and please, our candidate. Ours is to win the election.
Some of the members believe that recent defections from the party and the coalition movement will not affect the fortunes of the party during the polls.
PDP in North Central Zone is intact. There is no issue of coalition or ADC. And the leaders of the party in FCT are here with us. Nobody is missing and no one will miss, inshallah. So to tell you, PDP is intact in the North Central Zone. If we did it yesterday, inshallah, we'll do it today and we're going to do it better tomorrow.
PDP is going to take over federal capital by the special grace of God. Amen. Our pastor and our imam, they have put it in prayer that there's no going back. Don't have that fear. Continue with that courage, with the decision you have taken, that you are going to make an election.
Currently, the party controls 3 area councils, including the Abuja Municipal Area Council, while the All Progressives Congress controls the remaining 3. Both parties will have to contend with the Labour Party, which is occupying the National Assembly seats for the FCT.
And for more about Nigeria's informal sector, is back now to Lagos with Will Ibong for Business News.
Thank you, Millicent. Now, the National Bureau of Statistics has been explaining the delay in the release of the rebased gross domestic product, GDP. The Statistician General of the Federation and the Chief Executive Officer of the National Bureau of Statistics, Prince Adeyemi Adeniran, stresses that the process is elaborate to capture the informal sector, which holds a major part of the country's economic activities.
So it is not the usual working office work that we capture when we talk about employment. But these are people that are working on their own. And from that survey, we are able to capture all activities by all sectors in the informal sector. That is why in this rebasing, we are going to give data on the 46 economic sector, both for formal and informal, because through that survey, we are able to classify all informal activities into all the 46 sectors that we have. So we see the proportion of formal sector in a particular activity, and we see the proportion that is coming from informal sector for that activity as well.
Now, as Nigeria mourns the passing of former President Muhammadu Buhari, who died on July the 13th, experts are reflecting on his complex economic legacy, a mix of bold reforms and persistent challenges. Speaking on Business Morning, the CEO of Finance with Mukhtar, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed, says it was a very turbulent time for businesses.
When he came then, he was not ready to devalue the currency. We saw the market. He believed so much that the Nigerian currency was still strong. At that time, they wanted the currency to be like 250 exchange rate. He bluntly refused. And then at the end of the day, we're doing it at 360. It took the intervention of the then Vice President Yemi Osinbajo when President Buhari was on medical vacation. to come in with the import-export market that drive that exchange rate from a high of about 500 to about 370. If you look at the stock market in terms of President Buhari time, like I said, the stock market relatively did not enjoy so much of the kind of numbers we see these days when President Buhari was there. But that was due to the fact that he was a Pan-Africanist. He believes that African problems should be solved by Africans.
Let's check in the crypto market. Bitcoin soared past $120,000 on Monday, setting a new all-time high amid growing optimism over potential U.S. crypto regulations. It traded at $121,855 by mid-morning after briefly topping $123,000. The rally is being fueled by strong inflows into Bitcoin ETFs, with a record $1.18 billion added last Thursday alone. Analysts say long-term institutional buyers are driving the surge. Despite trade tensions under President Trump, crypto experts believe big investors are holding firm, betting that Bitcoin could hit $125,000 in the coming weeks. From there, we head to the domestic equities market, which resumed bullish sentiments as the market cap crossed 80 trillion naira today. Laddie Williams tells us more.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. Well, the bulls are not letting off to start the week after closing up over 4% last week. We're seeing a continuation today for this trend at 0.43%, and the all-share index still holding on there, 126,000 points there, and the market cap sitting at 80 trillion naira. Let's look at the sectors that we track now. Consumer goods is down big today. It's a lone loser for the sectors that we track, 1.73% down, with the likes of Dangote Sugar, International Breweries losing over 1 naira per share, making the banking counter there stand tall, 1.88%, and a marginal gain by the oil and gas counter there by 0.03%. To the Tier 1 banks now, the rally continues, keeping the all-share index at record highs, with just GTCO down 0.27%, but we'll see UBA there at a massive 5.63%, allowing the bulls to maintain.
Thank you, Laddie. Let's see the performance of other major global stock markets now. And that's business news. It's back to Ayotunde for the rest of the news at 10.
Many thanks, Will. U.S. President Donald Trump says he is very, very unhappy with Russia and has announced plans to deliver top-of-the-line weapons to Ukraine via NATO. The U.S. president also says he will introduce very severe secondary tariffs of 100% if no ceasefire deal is reached within 50 days. Here's Simon Pusey with more international news and around the world in 5 from our London studio.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5.
And one of the reasons that you're here today is to hear that we are very unhappy, I am, with Russia.
Donald Trump says he is very, very unhappy with Russia and disappointed in President Vladimir Putin. While meeting the Secretary-General of NATO, Mark Rutte, US President said he will introduce very severe secondary tariffs of 100% if no ceasefire deal is reached with Ukraine within 50 days. It's after he said the US will send various pieces of very sophisticated military equipment to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he has had productive talks with the US envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, here seen embracing his opposite number in Kyiv.
We're very, very unhappy with him, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. You know what that means. But today we're going to talk about something else. And as you know, we've spent $350 billion approximately on this war with Russia and Ukraine.
We're in for about $350 billion. Europe is in for $100 billion. That's a lot of money, 100, but they should be in actually for more than us. So as we send equipment, they're going to reimburse us for that equipment. Doesn't that sound good? I haven't agreed on the number yet, but they're going to have some because they do need protection. But the European Union is paying for it. We're not paying anything for it, but we will send it. It'll be business for us, and we will send them Patriots, which they desperately need, because Putin really surprised a lot of people.
Tonight, I address you on a matter that concerns the security of our country.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has placed Police Minister Senzo Mchunu on an immediate leave of absence after allegations of links to organised crimes were made against him. In a televised speech to the nation, Mr. Ramaphosa also announced a judicial commission would probe the claims, which he said undermined the constitution and threatened national security. He added that legal professor Fioz Kachalia had been appointed as interim police minister. Mchunu has denied any wrongdoing, saying in a statement that he stood ready to respond to the accusations against him. At least 30 people have been killed in armed clashes between Sunni Bedouin tribal fighters and Druze militias in southern Syria. The violence erupted in the predominantly Druze city in the province of Sudan on Sunday, 2 days after a Druze merchant was reportedly abducted on the highway to Damascus. The Interior Minister called the situation a dangerous escalation and said security forces were being deployed to try to restore calm. French President Emmanuel Macron has outlined plans for a big increase in defence spending, warning Europe's liberty is facing a greater threat than at any time since the end of World War II. In a speech to the armed forces in Paris, he said, "We are living in a pivotal moment due to complex geopolitics." Mr. Macron called for France's defence spending to rise by €3.5 billion next year and then a further $3 billion in 2027. The Sudanese paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces have stormed the besieged city of El Fasher in a battle that raged for 7 hours. RSF fighters managed to capture a cattle market, a prison and a military base while broadcasting videos of themselves walking around empty stockyards. It was the first time RSF fighters had entered the city in large numbers since the siege of El Fasher. An ongoing battle for control of the western Darfur city began 15 months ago.
The humanitarian position has reached an intolerable state. Hospitals, humanitarian convoys, and other civilian objects are apparently being targeted. Famine is escalating, and humanitarian aid is not reaching those in dire need of it.
And the world's oldest head of state, Cameroon's President Paul Biya, has said he will run once more for re-election in October, aiming to extend his 43 years in power. The 92-year-old said that his decision to go for an 8th term came after numerous and insistent calls by the Cameroon and the diaspora. Biya's administration has faced criticism over corruption, embezzlement, bad governance, and the failure to tackle security challenges. There have also been concerns about his health and ability to govern.
And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome to Sports News. Super Falcons head coach Justin Madugu say that there will be no room for complacency when the 9-time African champions face Zambia in the quarterfinal on Friday. The Super Falcons finished top of Group B unbeaten with 7 points, while Zambia, despite finishing in the second spot in Group A, were also unbeaten, finished on 7 points. Coach Madugu is confident his girls' lack of goals in their last 2 matches will be corrected in the knockout stages.
We know that we're playing Zambia. We are aware of that. Like I said at the press conference, the pre-match press conference, from when the schedules were out, you have to anticipate who and who you will come up against, and then what are the likely plans you equally have for them. We have watched some of their games. We know some of their players. We'll go back and continue our analysis of the team, their strengths and their weaknesses, just as we know they will equally be doing. So it's not anything of concern for us because, like I said, for you to win the tournament, you must win all your matches.
And Super Falcons forward Rinsola Babajide has joined AS Roma on a 2-year deal, keeping her at the Italian club until June the 30th, 2027. Babajide scored on a Women's African Cup of Nations debut for the Super Falcons in the opening Group B game against Botswana. She featured for the England national team at the youth level from 2015 to 2019 before opting to play for Nigeria in 2023 and has played Millwall, Watford, Liverpool, Brighton before a spell in Spain with Real Betis. U.S. President Donald Trump has commended the world's football governing body FIFA for the Club World Cup. Trump attended the FIFA finals Sunday evening at MetLife Stadium, where Chelsea FC trounced PSG FC in what the president aptly described as a bit of an upset. The commander-in-chief was invited to the tournament by FIFA President Gianni Infantino, a longtime friend. He says he took great pleasure in watching soccer boom in the U.S., with the hope it could soon match the country's other standings on the world stage. And Nigeria's rising fencing stars in Nkosi, Bro and Wisdom Okolawo are set to compete at the 2025 World Fencing Championships scheduled to take place in Georgia from July the 22nd to the 30th. In addition to competing against the world's best, both athletes have been selected to participate in the International Fencing Federation training camp, which will precede the championship. Bro and Okolawo made their international debut earlier this year at the World Junior Championships in China. Now they are set to make their Senior World Championship debut in Georgia. That sports is back to you, Ayo.
And the main news again. Flags fly at half-mast as the federal government has declared a week-long national mourning as preparations conclude for the burial of former President Muhammadu Buhari in Daura tomorrow, July the 15th. Vice President Kashim Shettima visited President Muhammadu Buhari's family, joined by ex-President Goodluck Jonathan and Ghana's former leader Nana Akufo-Addo, as global leaders honor the former president's legacy. General Abdulsalami Abubakar has shared final days with the former president Muhammadu Buhari. The former head of state extended condolences and revealed that he and former President Buhari were both hospitalized in London before the former leader's passing. And the Awujale of Ijebuland Oba Sikiru Adetona has been laid to rest in Ijebu-Ode in Ogun State amid an outpouring of royal homage and tradition. And that's the news at 10 tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ayotunde Balogun. Do have a good one.